As our moderator mentioned, my name is Will Greene. I'm a rare disease researcher and patient advocate based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I am the parent of a child who lives with Prader-Willi syndrome, so that's my boy right up there. And I serve on the board of the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, which is the leading research-focused patient group that looks after the needs of the Prader-Willi syndrome community. And I'm here to provide a caregiver's perspective about AI and how I use it in my life and how I see it unfolding in genomic medicine and rare disease research. So I was told I had to start with disclosures. Fortunately, I don't have any disclosures really to give. I have no financial conflicts of interest because right now I have no employer or income. And the reason why, simply put, is that I left my job last year in order to focus full-time on rare disease research and advocacy because I thought that was the most interesting and important thing that I could do with my time. And so even though I don't have any formal employers, I am involved in a bunch of initiatives and projects. One that I wanted to mention is I am the lead author on a forthcoming white paper with the World Economic Forum that's building the case for greater investment in rare disease data. Part of that case is about powering the AI models. I mean, there's many more good reasons to invest in rare disease data aside from just AI, but that's one of the key ones that we call out. So that paper is coming out in February of next year. I hope you get a chance to read it and let me know what you think. Prior to that, I did spend 5 years at Roche out of their Singapore office looking after their Asia-Pacific thought leadership and marketing and stakeholder engagement activities. So I am an industry person. I do come from that background. And before that, I did run a consultancy that did a bunch of project work in AI and genomics and precision medicine and all that stuff. But none of this is to say that I am an expert in AI or genomics at all. What I am is just a person who uses these tools primarily in my own personal life. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I do that. So these days, I use AI basically every single day, and I use it in almost every single facet of my caregiving responsibilities in terms of my research and my advocacy work. And so I use different models, I use them in different ways, and I use them every single day. But that was not always the case because my caregiver journey started before the current moment of the AI boom. So my journey as a caregiver started in December 2021 when my son was born. This is my first and only child. It was, one of those magical experiences that many of you have experienced of becoming a parent for the first time. And I was crying with joy for about 3 minutes until the neonatal pediatrician picked up my son and went like, oh, And it was there that we had some idea that maybe something wasn't quite right. He was whisked off to the NICU. And over the coming days, we got a bigger picture that something definitely was not quite right. So he had many of the signs and symptoms of a genetic disease. We weren't sure exactly which one quite yet, but he had low birth weights, an inability to cry or drink, hypotonia, basically the floppy muscles, and a whole bunch of other worrying signs. So we started off on the diagnostic odyssey. And I don't really have time in the context of this presentation to talk about the diagnostic odyssey in detail, even though I think it's very germane to this topic. So maybe in the Q&A, we can come back to that. But suffice it to say, after a month, which in this world, in rare disease world, is not too long to wait for a diagnosis, we found out that our son has Prader-Willi syndrome. Now, I think many of you know Prader-Willi syndrome. In fact, maybe if I can get a show of hands, how many of you have heard of Prader-Willi syndrome before? Oh, yeah, basically you're all geneticists, right? Like, so you all get it. So I don't really need to explain this to you. You know the issues, hyperphagia, that feeling of constant hunger that causes a lot of kids to eat to the point of morbid obesity, sometimes even stomach rupture and death, causes tremendous anxiety, basically intellectual disability, developmental delays, all sorts of medical problems. Basically, it's a big mess. And, it's a tough diagnosis. It was very emotionally impactful. There wasn't too much time for self-pity, though, because we needed to get our son on a treatment plan fast. We needed, in those initial months, to negotiate complexities like nasogastric tube feeding, just an endless spectrum of specialist consultations and medical appointments, a few surgeries, and then getting him on growth hormone, which is standard of care. And so those first few months were a whirlwind, but pretty soon, as the dust settled, my wife and I, we started getting into rare disease research and advocacy, connecting with the broader community. I personally spent most of my time working with the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, doing a lot of content development, doing fundraising, doing a whole host of activities to try and advance the mission of the organization. And I still was with Roche at that time. And I did manage to secure some funding from within Roche to also do some research on newborn screening and sequencing too. So I got to do a whole series of articles and videos about this topic, got to go all over the world interviewing experts. I realized actually as I was putting this slide together that I'm actually wearing the same sweater in all here today as well. So maybe I need to buy a second sweater perhaps. But yeah, I mean, so over those first few years, dozens of articles, dozens of videos, hundreds of social media posts, emails to people who I'm trying to raise money from or raise awareness of this issue for. And for most of that time, I did not use AI at all. All this stuff was done by hand, and it was a huge amount of work. All of that changed last year when I was reviewing grants for the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research, and I was stuck on one grant that was particularly dense and technical, and I couldn't get it at all, but it seemed promising. And so I started playing around with some of these various AI models to assist me in understanding this grant. And that was the moment at which my mind was blown. I was like, whoa, this is incredibly useful. It was helping me to clarify terms I didn't understand, pull out data points that I was looking for from within the grant. And so it was really, really helpful. And that was the point at which sort of my mind was open to the incredible possibility of these new models. Unfortunately, I realized quite soon thereafter that I broke protocol. So my foundation, like many others in this space, actually explicitly limits or forbids the use of AI for grant reviews. And so I won't speak for the foundation specifically, but my sense is that there's really two reasons why they have this policy. The first is that they're worried that some people might just outsource all of their thinking to the AIs. They might just plug the grant into the AI and spit out the results and use that. And I can say, having done a few cycles of grant reviews, for the most part, the people who are reviewing these grants are very passionate, very deep thinkers. But I did encounter one person who did ultimately just stick the grant in the AI, take the results, and put it in the portal where we put our solutions. So it is a risk. People are sometimes going to be tempted to take the easy way out with AI. So that's one reason why our foundation has this policy. The second reason is that many of the scientists are concerned that if their grant proposals go into the AI, that somehow that will result in some kind of leakage of intellectual property. And I'm sympathetic to that argument. At the same time, I mean, I feel like that's kind of a pretty low probability risk. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree with me. We can talk about this. But, I think that most people couldn't care less about these grants. These are highly technical, niche, esoteric things. And I don't think that the risk of intellectual property leakage will come from somebody like me asking ChatGPT what they think of some aspect of their grant. But nonetheless, I'm sympathetic. I respect that. Nowadays, I only use AI as an ancillary tool in reviewing grants. What I do, though, like many other caregivers like myself, is I put everything into these models. I don't care. Like, I don't worry about data privacy or security. I just need answers now in most cases. And so as one example of that, one of the challenges in Prader-Willi is managing growth hormone dosing. And this is kind of part science, part arts. There's a bunch of different formulas you can use. Different endocrinologists have different ways of evaluating that. And over the last few years, as I've been managing this dosing challenge, I have pages and pages of notes that I've been keeping from all of my clinical interactions. And recently, once again, his growth factor values got a little out of range, and we were trying to figure out what's going on. And I just took all those notes and I plopped them into one of the AIs that I use. And I said, just give me a summary of like his growth factor values over the last 2 years. And it was able to do it just like that. It was incredible. It saved me probably half an hour of time. And that might not sound like a lot. Maybe it does to a busy clinician, but to me, that was a big time savings. And if you add all these time savings together, it's hours and days and tons of effort. And as a busy caregiver, I really appreciate these types of things. Now, in addition to caregiving, I use it extensively for my research and advocacy work. Almost everything that I write now goes through an AI. Many of the articles that I write or campaigns that I run start actually as literal conversations between me and an AI. I'll just kind of pick up one of the AI tools that I use and I say, hey, I want to write an article about this, and here are some ideas, and here's some general points that I want to bring up. What do you think? And then it always tells me that I'm a genius, and so, but then, you know, it will typically help me prepare a first draft, and then we'll iterate off it. And I got to say, as somebody who's worked as a professional journalist and writer, who's done content for all sorts of organizations, who has a lot of pride in my own ability to write and communicate, I still find that when I use these tools, it makes me much, much better. And actually, coincidentally, I wrote an article about AI in pediatric genomic medicine a few months ago. I think that's actually why I was invited to talk here today. And that article started as me having a conversation with a chatbot saying, hey, I have this idea. I'm also using it for fundraising campaigns. So I'm actually heading off to New York tomorrow to run the New York City Marathon to raise money for the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research. That campaign involved dozens of emails, dozens of social media posts, stuff that's super time consuming. And the AI helps me with all of that, has probably shaved off half the amount of time that I would have needed for that. So I'm running out of time here, but basically I'm going to conclude by stating the absolute obvious things. So the first is that the genie is far out of the bottle. Patients and caregivers like me are using AI for everything. I think you all know that. We're plugging all of our personal data into it. And for many of us, you know, the privacy thing matters. Some of us are concerned about it. But at the end of the day, quick answers to real problems matter a lot more than abstract concerns about privacy. All that being said, anybody who uses these tools regularly enough knows that they're not perfect, they hallucinate, they flatter you, you know, they do all sorts of things that are problematic. And so, of course, we still need a lot of human intelligence and smart human intelligence to point those AIs in the right direction. And that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to help create a better future for my son right over there. Today, he's doing great, looking very cute. It is a scary future, though, that is ahead, and hopefully AI will help me navigate some of the challenges that I know are coming. That's my talk.